The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a nervous-looking process server who could barely meet my eyes. I signed for it with hands that still shook from 3 months of physical therapy, wondering why anyone would be sending me legal documents. Inside was a notice of sale completion. My house, the house I'd built with my own hands 40 years ago, had been sold for $750,000. The buyer was listed as Jennifer Morrison of Morrison Development, LLC. My daughter's married name was Jennifer Morrison. I stared at that paper until the words blurred together, my heart hammering against ribs that were still tender from the accident. 3 months I'd spent in the hospital and rehabilitation center after that drunk driver ran the red light. 3 months of surgeries, infections, setbacks, and slow healing. 3 months of my daughter visiting twice a week, holding my hand, telling me everything would be okay. She'd sold my house while I was fighting for my life. But Jessica had no idea about the lake house. Let me back up and tell you how this all started, because the betrayal didn't happen overnight. It had been building for years, like cracks in a foundation that you don't notice until the whole structure comes crashing down. My name is Robert Sterling, but everyone calls me Bob. I'm 73 years old, a retired contractor who spent his life building things that would last. Houses mostly, but also relationships, or so I thought. My wife Sarah passed away 5 years ago after a long battle with cancer, leaving me alone in the house we'd raised our daughter in. That daughter, Jessica, was 45 years old, with 2 teenage kids and a husband who worked in commercial real estate. The accident happened on a Wednesday evening in October. I was driving home from the hardware store, taking my time like I always did, when a pickup truck ran the red light at Mason and 5th. The impact crushed the driver's side of my old Ford pickup, broke 3 ribs, punctured my lung, and shattered my left leg in 4 places. I don't remember much about the first 2 weeks. The doctors told me later that I'd been touch and go, that my age worked against me, that my family should prepare for the worst. Jessica told me she'd been there every day, sitting beside my bed, talking to me even when I couldn't respond. "I was so scared, Dad," she said during one of my clearer moments in week 3. "The doctors said you might not make it. I couldn't lose you too, not after Mom." I squeezed her hand, grateful beyond words for her devotion. Jessica had always been a good daughter, even if she'd grown distant after her mother's death. She had her own life, her own problems. Her husband Mike's real estate business had been struggling, and the kids needed money for college. I understood the pressures she was under. What I didn't understand was how those pressures would turn her into someone I didn't recognize. The first hint that something was wrong came during week 6 of my recovery. I was finally alert enough to handle my own affairs, and I asked Jessica to bring me my checkbook so I could pay some bills. "Don't worry about that, Dad," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "I've been handling everything. Your bills are paid, your accounts are in order." "That's very thoughtful, sweetheart, but I'd like to see the statements myself, just to keep track of things." She fidgeted with her purse strap, a nervous habit I remembered from her childhood. "The statements are at home. I'll bring them next time." But she never did. Every time I asked, there was an excuse. The statements were in Mike's office. She'd forgotten them at home. The bank was updating their system. Always something. The second warning sign was her sudden interest in my will and estate planning. "Dad, have you updated your will recently?" she asked during week 8, trying to sound casual while fluffing my pillows. "Not since your mother died. Why?" "Well, things change. Property values, tax laws. Mike thinks you should have everything reviewed by an attorney. You know, just to make sure everything's in order." Mike thinks. That phrase had been cropping up a lot in our conversations lately. "Mike thinks you should sell the truck since you can't drive it anymore. Mike thinks the house is too big for you to maintain alone. Mike thinks, Mike thinks, Mike thinks." "I'll consider it," I told her, but something cold was settling in my stomach. The third warning sign was the real estate agents. During week 10, just as I was preparing for discharge to a rehabilitation facility, Jessica mentioned that someone had been interested in the house. "Interested how?" I asked. "Oh, you know how it is. Word gets around when someone's been in the hospital for a while. This agent said she had a client looking for properties in our neighborhood. She wondered if you might consider selling." Our neighborhood. She'd grown up there, but it hadn't been her neighborhood for 20 years. "I'm not interested in selling, Jessica. That's my home." "Of course, Dad." I told her that, but she left her card, just in case you change your mind. The market is really hot right now. Houses are going for way more than anyone expected. She pulled a business card from her wallet, creased from handling. Karen Matthews, Premium Properties. I took it, but didn't look at it closely. I should have. Sunset Manor Rehabilitation Center was supposed to be temporary. 6 weeks of physical therapy to get my leg working again, occupational therapy to rebuild my strength, and then home. That was the plan Jessica and I discussed with the discharge planner. What I didn't know was that Jessica had told the staff I might be staying longer. Your daughter mentioned you were considering making this a permanent arrangement, said Linda, the social worker, during my intake interview. Permanent? No, I'm going home as soon as I'm able. Linda checked her notes, frowning. She said you'd been having trouble maintaining the house, that you'd fallen several times before the accident. I never fell, and I maintained my house just fine. But I could see the doubt in Linda's eyes. To her, I was just another old man whose family was trying to do the right thing. She probably saw it every week. Elderly parents who insisted they were fine, while their children worried about safety and independence. The thing is, I was fine. Before the accident, I'd been in better shape than most men my age. I still did my own yard work, home repairs, even helped neighbors with their projects. The accident was just that. An accident. It had nothing to do with my age or abilities. But try explaining that to people who'd already made up their minds. 3 months after the accident, I was finally ready for discharge. My leg was healing well. I could walk with just a cane, and I was eager to get back to my own bed, my own routine, my own life. That's when the process server arrived with the envelope that changed everything. I read the sale documents 3 times before the reality sank in. The sale had been completed 2 weeks ago. The house I'd built in 1983, where I'd raised my daughter and cared for my dying wife, where 40 years of memories lived in every board and nail, had been sold without my knowledge or consent. My hands were shaking as I reached for the phone. Jessica, I need you to come here right now. Dad, you sound upset. What's wrong? What's wrong is that I just received papers showing you sold my house. What's wrong is that you've apparently been forging my signature on legal documents. What's wrong is that my own daughter has stolen from me. The silence stretched so long, I thought she'd hung up. Dad, I can explain. You have 30 minutes. Get here now. Before we continue with what happened next, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support means everything to us, and we love hearing from our viewers around the world. Jessica arrived 25 minutes later with Mike in tow. I could see the guilt written across her face before she even sat down. But it was Mike who did most of the talking. Bob, we need you to understand that we did this for your own good, he began, settling into the visitor's chair like he was about to deliver a business presentation. For my own good? You sold my house behind my back, and it was for my own good? You're not thinking clearly about your situation, Mike continued, his voice taking on that patronizing tone people use when they think they're dealing with someone incompetent. You can't live alone anymore. The accident proved that. This facility is much better equipped to handle your needs. The accident was caused by a drunk driver, not by my inability to live independently. Jessica finally spoke up, tears in her eyes. Dad, you could have died. When I got that call from the hospital, I realized how alone you are, how vulnerable. What if it happens again? What if you fall or have a heart attack or... So you decided to sell my home and put me away like an unwanted piece of furniture. It's not like that, she protested. We looked into your finances. The house was becoming a burden. The property taxes, the maintenance costs, the utilities. It was eating up your savings. My savings are none of your business. Mike leaned forward. Actually, Bob, they are. Jessica has power of attorney for your financial affairs. It became effective when you were declared temporarily incapacitated due to your injuries. The room seemed to tilt around me. I never signed any power of attorney. Jessica pulled a folder from her purse, her hands trembling. You did, Dad. Right before your surgery, when they said you might not make it. You were conscious for a few minutes, and the lawyer said we needed to handle your affairs in case. I stared at the signature on the document. It looked like mine, sort of, but shaky and uncertain. The kind of signature a man might make while drugged and fighting for his life. You took advantage of me when I was dying. We saved you from financial ruin, Mike shot back. That house was worth $750,000. The sale proceeds are being invested conservatively to fund your long-term care. You should be thanking us." That's when something inside me snapped. Not the explosive anger you might expect, but something colder and more calculating. I looked at my daughter, my only child, the little girl I'd taught to ride a bicycle and helped with her homework and walked down the aisle at her wedding, and I realized I was looking at a stranger. "Get out! Dad, please! Get out of my room, get out of my life, and don't come back." Jessica started crying in earnest then, but Mike just looked annoyed. "Bob, you're being unreasonable. We're trying to help you. The help I need from you is to never see your faces again." They left, but not before Mike made it clear that the power of attorney was still in effect, that all my financial decisions would go through them, that I was now essentially a ward of my own daughter. After they left, I sat in my room staring out the window at the parking lot, watching normal people come and go with their normal lives. I felt hollowed out, like someone had reached inside my chest and removed everything that mattered. But then, I remembered the lake house. Back in 1995, when Jessica was in college and money was tight, I'd taken on a side job renovating a small cabin on Lake Hartwell, about an hour outside of town. The owner, an elderly man named Frank Morrison, no relation to my daughter's married name, had inherited the property from his father, but lived in Florida and never used it. "Tell you what, Bob," Frank had said after I'd finished the renovation, "I'm getting too old to deal with property management from 800 miles away. You interested in buying it? I'll give you a fair price." The cabin was small, just 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen, and a living room, but it sat on 2 acres of pristine lakefront property. Frank was asking $45,000, which was reasonable even then, but more than Sarah and I could afford with Jessica's college expenses. "I wish I could, Frank, but the timing's not right. How about we do owner financing? No banks, no credit checks. You pay me $500 a month for 10 years, and it's yours. I trust you, and I'd rather see it go to someone who'll take care of it." I talked it over with Sarah that night. We were already stretched thin, but something about that little cabin called to me. Maybe it was the way the morning mist rose off the water, or the sound of loons calling in the evening, or just the peace of being away from the noise and rush of town. It would be our secret place, I told Sarah, somewhere we could go to get away from everything. She was hesitant at first. $500 a month was a lot of money for us, but she fell in love with the place the first time I took her there. "It feels like we're 100 miles from civilization," she said, standing on the little dock I'd repaired, watching the sun set over the water. We made our first payment to Frank in June of 1995, and for the next 10 years, we spent nearly every weekend at the lake house. We'd drive up Friday evening after work, spend Saturday and Sunday fishing, reading, working in the garden Sarah planted, and just enjoying each other's company. The strange thing was, we never told Jessica about it. At first, it was because we weren't sure we could afford the payments, and we didn't want to get her hopes up about a vacation home we might have to sell. Then, as the years went on, it became our private retreat. Jessica was busy with college, then her career, then her marriage and kids. When she did visit, she seemed more interested in our main house, her old room, the familiar places of her childhood. The lake house was just ours. Sarah loved it there. Even during her final illness, when she was too weak for much else, she insisted we spend time at the lake. I'd carry her out to the dock in a lawn chair, and we'd sit together watching the water, not needing to talk, just being together in the place that had become the center of our marriage. After she died, I kept going to the lake house every weekend. It was where I felt closest to her memory, where I could sit on the dock with her ashes in an urn beside me and tell her about my week, my worries, my loneliness. I'd paid off the cabin in 2005, and Frank had signed over the deed before moving to an assisted living facility. The property was mine, free and clear, titled in my name alone. I'd never mentioned it on any financial forms Jessica might have seen, never listed it as an asset, never even told her it existed. As far as Jessica and Mike knew, the house they'd just stolen was my only property. They had no idea I owned 2 acres of lakefront real estate that was now worth at least $400,000. That night, lying in my narrow rehabilitation center bed, I began planning my future. The first step was getting out of Sunset Manor and away from Jessica's legal control. The second step was making sure she never got her hands on my real assets. I called my old attorney, Harold Kim, first thing the next morning. "Bob, I heard about your accident. How are you feeling?" "I've been better, Harry. Listen, I need your help with something urgent. My daughter has power of attorney over my affairs, and I need to revoke it." There was a pause. "Are you sure about that?" Power of attorney can be very helpful when you're dealing with health issues. "She sold my house without my consent. I need to regain control of my finances before she does any more damage." "She sold your house?" "Bob, that's a serious allegation. Are you certain you didn't authorize the sale? Sometimes medications and trauma can affect memory." "Harry, I've known you for 15 years. Do I sound confused to you?" Another pause. "No, you sound like yourself." "Okay, I can help you revoke the power of attorney, but I'll need to see you in person to verify your competency. Can you get to my office?" "Not easily. I'm still in rehabilitation. Can you come here?" "I'll be there this afternoon." Harry arrived at 2 o'clock with a briefcase full of documents and a concerned expression on his weathered face. He was 75, 3 years older than me, but still sharp as a tack and still practicing law because he loved it. "Tell me exactly what happened," he said, settling into the visitor's chair. I explained everything: the accident, the forged power of attorney, the sale of my house, Jessica and Mike's plan to keep me institutionalized so they could control my assets. Harry took notes in his careful handwriting, occasionally asking questions for clarification. When I finished, he sat back and shook his head. "This is elder financial abuse, Bob. Clear as day. We can pursue criminal charges if you want. I don't want my daughter to go to jail. I just want to protect what's left of my assets and get my independence back." "What assets?" "If she sold your house under power of attorney, those proceeds are legally yours, but they're probably in an account she controls." I looked around the room to make sure we were alone, then leaned forward. "Harry, there's something Jessica doesn't know about. Something that changes everything." I told him about the lake house, about the years of secret ownership, about the current market value of lakefront property. His eyebrows climbed higher with every detail. "Bob, you're telling me you own unencumbered real estate worth nearly $500,000, and your daughter has no idea it exists?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you." Harry was quiet for a long moment, thinking. "Here's what we're going to do. First, we revoke the power of attorney immediately. I'll file the paperwork today. Second, we establish your competency with a formal evaluation. I know a geriatric psychiatrist who can do that here at the facility. Third, we set up a new will and estate plan that protects your assets from future interference. What about getting out of here? Once the power of attorney is revoked and your competency is established, no one can keep you here against your will. You can discharge yourself and go wherever you want." "I want to go to the lake house." Harry smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen in months. "Then, that's exactly where you'll go." Dr. Patricia Williams was a small woman in her 50s with kind eyes and the sort of patient demeanor that probably came from years of dealing with families in crisis. Harry had arranged for her to conduct a formal competency evaluation, which would be legally binding and protect me from future challenges to my mental state. "Mr. Sterling, I understand you're seeking to revoke a power of attorney that was granted while you were hospitalized." "That's correct. I was barely conscious when it was signed, heavily medicated, and fighting for my life. I never would have agreed to it under normal circumstances." She conducted a thorough mental status exam, testing my memory, reasoning ability, understanding of consequences, and decision-making capacity. We talked about my finances, my living situation, my plans for the future. "Mr. Sterling, your daughter and son-in-law have expressed concerns about your ability to live independently. They say you've been having falls, forgetting to pay bills, neglecting home maintenance." "Doctor, I never had a fall before the car accident. My bills were always paid on time. You can check with any utility company. And I maintain my house better than most men half my age. I was a contractor for 45 years. Taking care of property is what I do." They also mentioned that you've been depressed since your wife's death, that you've been isolating yourself. "I grieved my wife, yes. Any man who didn't grieve a 47-year marriage would be the one with mental problems. But I wasn't depressed in any clinical sense. I had friends, hobbies, interests. I was living my life." Dr. Williams made notes throughout our conversation, occasionally asking me to explain my reasoning or elaborate on my plans. After 2 hours, she closed her notepad and looked directly at me. "Mr. Sterling, in my professional opinion, you show no signs of cognitive impairment, dementia, or any other condition that would affect your ability to make informed decisions about your life and assets. You are fully competent to handle your own affairs. Relief flooded through me like cool water. Thank you, doctor. I will be filing a report with the court stating that the power of attorney granted while you were incapacitated should be revoked and that you are capable of independent living. Your family may not like it, but legally, they have no grounds to override your decisions. Jessica arrived for her regular visit the next day, bringing flowers and her usual forced cheerfulness. She had no idea that everything had changed overnight. Hi, Dad. How are you feeling today? I'm feeling like myself again. In fact, I'm feeling competent, legally competent, according to Dr. Williams. The color drained from her face. What doctor? Dad, what are you talking about? The geriatric psychiatrist who evaluated me yesterday at the request of my attorney. The same attorney who revoked your power of attorney this morning. Jessica sank into the visitor's chair like her legs had given out. Dad, you don't understand what you're doing. You need help managing your finances. The house sale was just the beginning. We have plans to invest that money to make sure you're taken care of for the rest of your life. You mean you have plans to spend my money? That's not fair. Everything we've done has been for your benefit. Really? Then explain why Mike's real estate business just purchased a new Mercedes. Explain why you've been looking at houses in Deer Valley that cost twice what my house sold for. Explain why your kids suddenly have college funds they didn't have 6 months ago. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. How do you know about any of that? I have friends, Jessica, people who care about me and pay attention to what's happening in this town. People who thought it was strange that Bob Sterling's daughter was suddenly throwing money around while Bob Sterling was lying in a hospital bed. This was partly true. Mrs. Chen from the Chinese restaurant had mentioned seeing Jessica at the Mercedes dealership, but mostly I was bluffing. The stricken look on Jessica's face told me I'd guessed correctly. Dad, we can explain all of that. Don't bother, just answer one question. Where's the money from the house sale right now? She fidgeted with her purse strap. It's invested safely. Mike has experience with these things. What kind of investments? Conservative ones. CDS, money market accounts, some blue chip stocks. How much is left? The fidgeting intensified. All of it. Well, most of it. There were some expenses. How much, Jessica? About $400,000. So they'd already spent or invested $350,000 of my money in the 3 months since the sale. Money they'd stolen by taking advantage of my injuries and forging legal documents. I want it back. All of it. Dad, that's not possible. Some of it's tied up in investments that can't be liquidated without penalties. And some of it went to legitimate expenses. Your medical bills, this facility, legal fees. My insurance covered the medical bills. Medicare is paying for this facility. What legal fees? She looked like she wanted to run from the room. The attorney who handled the house sale, the financial advisor who set up your investment portfolio, the accountant who restructured your taxes. All people Mike hired to help you steal my money. We didn't steal anything. We were trying to protect your assets. That's when I played my ace. Jessica, do you remember the cabin I renovated for Frank Morrison back in 1995? She frowned, thrown by the sudden change of subject. Vaguely. Why? I bought it from him. I've owned it for 28 years. 2 acres of lakefront property that's now worth about $400,000. The confusion on her face was almost comical. What are you talking about? You never owned a lake house. I own it free and clear. Your mother and I spent nearly every weekend there for 10 years. After she died, I went there to grieve and remember. It's where her ashes are scattered, where our happiest memories live. That's impossible. I would have known. You would have known if you'd paid attention to anything other than my bank account. But you were too busy with your own life to notice where your parents went on weekends. Too busy to ask about the place that meant everything to us. She was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Even if that's true, it doesn't matter. I still have power of attorney. No, you don't. I revoked it yesterday. Dr. Williams certified that I'm fully competent to manage my own affairs. Harold Kim filed the paperwork this morning. Legally, you have no more control over my finances than any other stranger on the street. That's when the tears started. But they weren't tears of remorse or guilt. They were tears of frustration and anger. Dad, You're making a horrible mistake. You can't live alone anymore. What if something happens to you? What if you fall or have another accident or... Then I'll deal with it like an adult, like I've been dealing with problems for 73 years. Where will you even live? We sold your house. I smiled for the first time in months. I'll live at the lake house, the one you didn't know about, the one you can't touch. I discharged myself from Sunset Manor the next morning, signing papers that released them from any liability for my decision to leave against medical advice. It felt like breaking out of prison. Harry picked me up in his old Buick, and we drove straight to the lake house. I hadn't been there since before the accident, and I was worried about how it might look after 4 months of neglect. But the property management company I'd hired years ago had kept everything in perfect condition. Grass mowed, leaves raked, utilities maintained. "Bob, this place is beautiful," Harry said, standing on the dock and looking out over the water. "I can see why you and Sarah loved it here. The cabin was exactly as I'd left it, small but comfortable, with everything I needed for a simple life. 1 bedroom for me, 1 bedroom that served as an office and storage room, a kitchen with all the basics, a living room with a fireplace and Sarah's favorite reading chair, a bathroom with a shower I'd modified for accessibility after her illness. But the real treasure was outside. 2 acres of lakefront property with mature trees, a private dock, and the kind of peace you can't buy at any price." "What's your plan now?" Harry asked as we sat on the deck, sharing coffee and watching a family of ducks paddle past. "First, I'm going to live quietly and enjoy my retirement. Second, I'm going to set up a new will that makes sure Jessica never gets a penny of my estate. Third, I'm going to decide what to do about the money she stole." "You could pursue criminal charges. What she did was elder financial abuse, fraud, maybe even identity theft. I don't want her to go to jail, Harry. She's still my daughter, even after everything she's done. But I do want justice." "What kind of justice?" I thought about that question for a long time, watching the sun sparkle on the water, where Sarah's ashes had drifted on the wind 5 years ago. The kind that teaches her the value of what she threw away. 2 weeks later, Harry returned with a new will and estate plan that would have made Sarah proud. It was simple, elegant, and completely bulletproof. "Upon your death, the lake house and all your remaining assets will go to establish the Sarah Sterling Memorial Foundation for Elder Care," Harry explained, reading from the documents. "The foundation will provide legal services and advocacy for elderly people who are being financially abused by their own families." "Perfect. Jessica gets nothing?" "Jessica gets a letter explaining exactly why she's been disinherited. She also gets the knowledge that her inheritance is going to help other people avoid the betrayal she put me through. And the money she already spent?" That was the trickier part. Harry had filed civil suits to recover the stolen funds, but Mike had been clever about how he'd moved the money. Some of it was tied up in long-term investments that would be costly to liquidate. Some had been spent on legitimate expenses that would be hard to challenge. Some had simply disappeared into their lifestyle. "We might recover half of it," Harry estimated. "Maybe less. That's okay. The money isn't what matters most anymore. What matters most? Making sure she understands what she lost when she chose greed over love." 3 months into my new life at the lake house, I received a letter from Jessica. It was the first communication we'd had since our confrontation at the rehabilitation center. "Dad, I know you're angry with me, and I understand why. Mike and I made some mistakes in how we handled your situation. We were scared about your health and worried about your safety, and we made some bad decisions. But we never meant to hurt you. Everything we did was because we love you and want what's best for you. Can we please talk? Can we try to work things out? The kids miss their grandfather, and I miss my dad. Love, Jessica." I read the letter 3 times, looking for any acknowledgement of what she'd actually done wrong, any genuine remorse for stealing my house and my money, any understanding of the betrayal she'd put me through. There was none. Just excuses and the assumption that I'd eventually forgive her because family is family. I wrote back the same day. "Jessica, you say you made some mistakes, but you don't seem to understand what those mistakes actually were. You didn't just make bad decisions. You committed fraud. You forged my signature on legal documents while I was fighting for my life. You sold my house without my knowledge or consent. You spent my money on your own luxuries while telling me it was for my own good. Most importantly, you threw away a relationship with a father who would have given you anything you needed if you'd just been honest with me. If you'd come to me before the accident and said, "Dad, Mike's business is struggling and we're worried about the kids' college expenses," I would have helped you. If you'd said, "Dad, we're concerned about you living alone in that big house," we could have discussed alternatives together. Instead, you chose to steal from me. And even now in your letter, you're not apologizing for stealing. You're apologizing for getting caught. I'm doing well, Jessica. I'm living in a beautiful place that makes me happy every day. I have enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my life. I have friends who care about me without wanting anything in return. What I don't have is a daughter I can trust. Robert Sterling. I never heard back from her. Living at the lake house turned out to be the best decision I'd made in years. The peace and quiet were exactly what I needed to heal, not just from my physical injuries, but from the emotional wounds Jessica had inflicted. I developed a routine that suited me perfectly. Morning coffee on the dock, watching the sunrise over the water. Afternoons working in Sarah's garden or doing small maintenance projects around the property. Evenings reading by the fireplace or sitting outside listening to the loons call across the lake. I also made friends with my neighbors, something that had been harder in town where everyone seemed too busy for genuine connection. Tom and Betty Richardson lived in the next cabin over, a retired couple who'd moved to the lake full-time after Tom's heart attack 5 years ago. We started having coffee together on Sunday mornings, sharing stories about our careers, our families, our dreams for retirement. "You seem to be doing well for someone who lost his house," Betty observed one morning after I'd told them the whole story. "I didn't lose my house, Betty. I lost an address. This place has been my real home for almost 30 years. I just never had the courage to admit it before." There was also Margaret Wells, a widow in her 70s who lived alone in a cabin across the cove. She'd moved to the lake after her husband died, leaving behind a house full of memories that had become too painful to bear. "People think we're crazy," she said one evening as we shared dinner on my deck. "Living out here alone at our age, away from family and medical facilities and all the things we're supposed to need. Maybe we are crazy, but it's the good kind of crazy. The kind where you choose your own life instead of letting other people choose it for you." Exactly. A year after moving to the lake house, I decided it was time to start the Sarah Sterling Memorial Foundation for Elder Care. Harry helped me set up the legal structure, and I used some of my remaining savings to get it started. The foundation's mission was simple: provide free legal services to elderly people who were being financially abused by their own families. We also offered educational resources about elder rights, support groups for abuse survivors, and advocacy services for people trying to regain control of their assets. Our first client was a 78-year-old man named Walter Kowalski, whose son had moved in with him after a divorce and gradually taken over all his finances. By the time Walter realized what was happening, his son had spent nearly $200,000 of Walter's retirement savings on a new truck, a motorcycle, and a series of get-rich-quick schemes. "I feel so stupid," Walter told me during our first meeting. "How could I let my own son steal from me?" "You're not stupid, Walter. You trusted someone you loved, and they took advantage of that trust. The stupid person is the one who threw away a relationship with a good father for money." We helped Walter regain control of his remaining assets and pursue criminal charges against his son. More importantly, we helped him understand that the abuse wasn't his fault. The foundation grew quickly, funded by donations from people who had experienced similar betrayals and word-of-mouth referrals from satisfied clients. Within 2 years, we were helping 50 families a year and had a waiting list of people who needed our services. Sarah would have been proud. 3 years after moving to the lake house, I received an unexpected visitor. I was working in the garden when I heard a car pull into my driveway, and I looked up to see Jessica getting out of a Toyota that had seen better days. She looked older, tired, and much less put together than the confident woman who'd sold my house behind my back. Her clothes were nice but not expensive, her hair was graying at the roots, and she carried herself with the defeated posture of someone who'd learned that life doesn't always go according to plan. "Hello, Dad." I straightened up, my back protesting after an hour of weeding. "Jessica, you look good, healthy." "I am healthy. Clean living agrees with me." She gestured toward the cabin, the lake, the peaceful setting that had become my sanctuary. This place is beautiful. I can see why you chose it. I didn't choose it 3 years ago, Jessica. I chose it 28 years ago. This has been my home longer than you lived in the house you sold. She flinched at the reminder but didn't argue. Can we talk? I considered saying no, sending her away like I'd done with her letters and phone calls, but curiosity got the better of me. 5 minutes. We sat on the deck chairs where I'd shared so many peaceful evenings with Sarah, where I had grieved her loss and slowly learned to live without her. Having Jessica there felt like an intrusion, but I wanted to hear what had finally brought her to my door. Mike left me. I wasn't surprised, but I didn't say so. I'm sorry. Are you? Really? I'm sorry you're in pain. I was never sorry about Mike specifically. She almost smiled at that. You never liked him. I didn't trust him. There's a difference. You were right not to trust him. She told me the story then, how the money they'd stolen from me had gone to fund Mike's increasingly desperate attempts to save his failing business. The Mercedes, the house hunting, the kids' college funds, all of it had been financed with my assets. When the business finally collapsed completely, Mike had declared bankruptcy and moved to Phoenix with a woman 20 years younger than Jessica. The house they'd bought with my money was foreclosed on. The college funds were seized by creditors. Jessica was left with nothing but debt and the knowledge that she'd destroyed her relationship with her father for a man who'd never loved her as much as he loved her access to my money. The worst part, she said, staring out at the water, is that I knew better. Deep down, I knew what we were doing was wrong, but Mike kept saying it was for your own good, that you'd thank us eventually, that we were protecting you from yourself. And you wanted to believe him because it made the stealing easier to justify. Yes. It was the first completely honest thing she'd said to me in years. Why are you telling me this now, Jessica? Because I finally understand what I lost, not just the money. I know you'll never forgive me for that, and I don't blame you. But I lost my father. I lost the one person who loved me unconditionally, who would have helped me through any problem, who would have been there for me when Mike left. She was crying now, but quietly, without the dramatic sobs she'd used to manipulate me in the past. I can't undo what I did, Dad. I can't give you back your house or your money or the trust I broke. But I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry. Not sorry I got caught, but sorry I hurt you. I looked at this woman who'd once been my little girl, who'd sat in this same spot with Sarah and me on summer evenings, listening to stories and planning her future. Somewhere along the way, she'd become a stranger, willing to steal from her own father. But maybe, just maybe, she was finding her way back to being someone I could recognize. I forgive you, Jessica. She looked up in shock. You do? I forgive you for betraying me, for stealing from me, for breaking my heart when I was already fighting for my life. I forgive you because carrying that anger was poisoning my own happiness, and because your mother would have wanted me to. The hope that bloomed on her face was heartbreaking. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation, Jessica. Forgiveness doesn't mean I trust you again, and it doesn't mean you get to be part of my life. The hope died as quickly as it had appeared. I understand. Do you? Because I need you to really understand this. I've built a good life here. I have friends who care about me, work that gives me purpose, peace that I haven't felt since your mother died. I'm not willing to risk that for someone who's already proven they'll steal from me when times get tough. What if I could prove I've changed? How? By not stealing from me again? That's not proof of change, Jessica. That's the baseline requirement for human decency. She sat quietly for a while, processing the finality of what I was telling her. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. Are you happy? I looked around at the lake house, at the garden Sarah had planned, and I still tended, at the water where her ashes had become part of something larger and more beautiful than either of us could have imagined. Yes, I'm happy. For the first time since your mother died, I'm genuinely happy. I'm glad. You deserve to be happy. She stood to leave, and I walked her to her car. Dad, when you die, will there be anything? For the kids, I mean? They don't even remember what we did. They just know their grandfather disappeared from their lives. There's a letter, I said, explaining everything. They'll understand that their grandfather didn't disappear. He was stolen from them by parents who cared more about money than family. She got in her car and rolled down the window. I really am sorry. I know you are, but sorry doesn't fix what's broken, Jessica. Remember that, with your own children. I watched her drive away, then returned to my garden and the peaceful life she'd forced me to build without her. As I write this, I'm 78 years old and in better health than most men my age. The lake house has been my home for 5 years now, and I can't imagine living anywhere else. The Sarah Sterling Memorial Foundation has helped over 300 families recover from elder financial abuse, and we've prevented countless others by educating families about warning signs and legal protections. I never heard from Jessica again after that visit, but I keep track of her through mutual friends. She's working as a bookkeeper for a small business, renting a modest apartment, struggling to rebuild her life after Mike's betrayal. The kids are in community college, working part-time jobs to pay for their education, learning the value of money the hard way. Sometimes I feel sorry for them. They're paying the price for their parents' choices. But then I remember that every action has consequences, and sometimes those consequences extend beyond the person who made the original mistake. My will is unchanged. When I die, everything I own will go to the foundation, ensuring that my life's work continues to help people who find themselves in the same situation I faced 5 years ago. Jessica will get her letter explaining exactly why she was disinherited, and maybe, just maybe, she'll finally understand the true cost of choosing greed over love. As for me, I wake up every morning grateful for the life I've built from the ashes of the life she tried to destroy. I have friends who love me for who I am, not what I can give them. I have work that gives my days meaning and purpose. I have a home that brings me peace and connects me to the memories of my beloved Sarah. Most importantly, I have my dignity and independence, the things Jessica tried to take from me when she thought I was too weak and confused to fight back. She learned too late that you should never underestimate an old man who spent his whole life building things that last. And the lesson I built from her betrayal will outlast us all. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments what you thought about Bob's decision. Was justice served, or should he have given Jessica another chance? We love hearing your thoughts and experiences. Remember, family relationships should be built on love, respect, and trust, not on what someone can give you when they're gone. And if you have aging parents, the greatest gift you can give them isn't managing their money or making their decisions for them. It's respecting their independence and letting them know they're valued for who they are, not what they own. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.